My name is Sarah Lutz, and I'm going to be walking you through a tutorial of how to use a website called Create a Graph. To get to Create a Graph, you type in the URL https://nces.edu.gov/createagraph/. Once you have typed in the web address, a screen like this will appear. Create a Graph is free to use, but there's also another version called Create a Graph Classic. Create a Graph Classic is basically the same thing as Create a Graph. It's just an older version of it. So to get back to Create a Graph, you just click on Create a Graph. Create a Graph doesn't really require any form of login, so once you get to the website, you can basically just begin to create your graph. And Create a Graph's purpose is to help you form graphs that can help get points across quickly and visually. And it would be most appropriate for middle and high school age students or even for college students. And it could help them to appropriately create graphs for equations or graphs to show results from experiments. So now I'm going to show you how the tool works. So once you get to the home screen, which is this screen that you see now, you can pick which type of graph you want to create. If you aren't sure what type of graph you'd like to use, you can click on the Examples tab on the left, and this will pop up, and you can click on any of these to see examples. Like, for example, if I click on this, it shows me an example of a bar graph, or I could see an example of a line graph, or pie graph, or whatever I wanted to see examples of. So now to start your graph, you click the Start Over button on the bottom of the page, and this will pop up. You just click OK to start a new graph. So first you choose which graph type you want to create. You can choose from bar graphs, line graphs, area graphs, pie graphs, XY graphs. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using a bar graph, so I just click on the bar graph. Once you've chosen the graph type, this screen will pop up, and if you look to the right, there's 5 tabs: Design, Data, Labels, Preview, Print, and Save, and you can use these to help create your graph. The first tab is the Design tab, which is what you see when you first choose your graph. And on the Design tab, you can change the direction of your graph. You can make it vertical, horizontal, and if you're using 2 different groups to display, you can also make it stacked so that the 2 different colors will be on top of each other. I'm going to use vertical. You can also change the shape of your graph. You can make it a rectangle, a cylinder, triangle. You can even make it patterned or a rhombus shape. I'm going to use cylinders. You can also change the style of your graph here. This is where you can change the background color of your grid. You can make it whatever color you want. And you can also change the grid color, which will change the colors of the lines on your grid. And you can also change how many lines your grid has. I'm just going to leave it 6. You can also change if you want your graph to look 2D or 3D, and you can also make it have a shadow, and you can change the position of your legend. The next tab is the Data tab. On the Data tab, you can title your graph and name each axis. So to title your graph, you just type in whatever you want the title to be. And then your x-axis label, which would be the label that's going across from left to right, you can also label that. I'm just going to label x. And the y-axis, which is up and down, you can label that. You can also change the number of items and the number of groups that your graph will include. So you can increase or decrease the number of items, which would be how many different bars you have. And you can also change the number of groups. If you increase the number of groups, you'll have multiple bars for each item. So a tip would be to change each group's color so that you can see the difference. So you can change them to whatever color you want. Next, you can start actually putting in your information. So on the item labels, this will be the labels that are going on your x-axis. So I'm just going to label mine A, B, and C. And then you can add in values here. Your values are only allowed to be numbers, so you can put in whatever the numbers are based off of what you're trying to display, based off of the data that you have. You can also label your groups. So for the group 1, I'm just going to label it Z and Y, and then these labels would be showing up as sort of like a key on the right side of your graph. When you see your graph, it'll have colored squares and it'll be a key so that you know which each color stands for. And the last thing that you can do in the Data tab is change the min and max value. By changing the minimum value, it's where your graph is going to start. So I'll have my starting point at 0. And then the max value is like how high up your graph is going to go. So you can change that to whatever you want. Moving on to the next tab is the Labels tab. And when you click on the Labels tab, this is what you see. And here's how you can change how your graph is labeled. For example, when you click on this drop-down menu next to the type, you can make your graph show the value or the percent total of the entire graph. I'm just going to keep my value for now. And then you can also change like the position of where the labels are. You can make it outside top, inside bottom, and that'll show you if it's going to be inside your bar or if it's going to be outside of your bar. You can also use this tab to change the font size of the label. You can make it bigger or smaller, and you can change the color of your label. You can make it whatever you want. And if you don't want your bars to be labeled, you can just come over to this part and you can click no and it won't show any label, or if you want it to show, you click yes. You can also use this tab to change the size and the position and the color of your actual X and Y axes labels. So if you wanted to change the font, you can choose from a whole bunch of different variety of fonts. And then you can also change the color, and this would change the color of your X-axis and Y-axis labels. And if you wanted, you can make them bigger and smaller. The next tab we're going to look at is the Preview tab. The Preview tab is where you can see what you've created. A tip for you would be probably to go to the Preview tab often, because whenever you change something or add something to your graph, you can go to the Preview tab to see what it looks like and see if the change was actually what you want to show. And you can also use the preview to see if there's something on your graph that you don't like, so that you can go back and change it if you need to. The next tab we're going to look at is the Print and Save tab. This is the last tab. On the Print and Save tab, you can download, print, or email your graph. If you click on download, this box pops up and it gives you 6 different file formats that you can use to save your graph. When you're deciding which one you want to use, you can read these descriptions. PDF and SVG require Adobe, so if you don't have Adobe, it probably isn't best to use that. And they're also useful if you want to print your graph maybe in the future. PNG and JPG are for web pages. EMF is for clip art, so if you wanted to use your graph and put it into like a PowerPoint presentation or a Word presentation, you should use EMF. And then EPS is used for graphics, so if you have like a graphics program that you wanted to open it with, you can open it with. When you click on the Print tab, you also get 3 different file formats. You can use a PDF, but you also, again, have to have Adobe. You can save it as an image, or you can save it as an image with the data table and print it. You can also email your graph to yourself or to any friends or colleagues so that you can see your graph, and this would email a link of your graph to you or your colleague. And then this tab also allows you to start over to a new graph, erase your graph, or copy your graph to another graph. When creating a graph, there's a few tips and tricks that I can offer. First, when you're choosing your graph type, be sure to pick the best graph type for the information that you want to display and include in your graph, like based off of what you're trying to show and what information or data you have collected. Make sure you just pick the right graph. Another trick is whenever you change something on your graph or you add something new to your graph, go to the Preview tab, because say I look at this and I don't like that yellow background, I can go back to Design and I can change the yellow background to something a little bit lighter, and then I can go to Preview. And when I look at it, I like that much better. Another trick is when you're downloading or printing your graph, like I said, just be sure to choose the right file format, or the file format that's best for whatever you want to use your graph for. And the same thing when you're printing it, make sure you print it as a PDF if you have Adobe, or a graph image with a data table based on what you want to use it for. There is one problem that you should be aware of when you're using Create a Graph, and this problem is that you can't really finish, or you can't really go back to your project, so you have to finish your entire project in one sitting, because you can't go back and make changes after you've downloaded it. But there is one thing that you can do for this problem, and it is to email yourself the graph, because when you email yourself the graph, you get a link of your graph, and this will allow you to go back to the website by clicking on the link so that you can see your graph and edit it a little bit more. I'm going to show you now my sample graph that I created. I used a bar graph type because I wanted to display show the relationship between Eastern Tech students and the number of pets that they have. So I used the different tabs and I changed my bar colors to blue, and I labeled the bars based off of what their numbers are. And I also changed the label sizes and made them bigger so that it was easier to see. And I also created my key over here by showing the number of pets is what each bar shows. And I also collected information from my friends and how much pets they have, and I used the bar graph to display this. And I saved my graph as a PDF because I thought that maybe in the future I would want to print it, and when you were downloading your graph or saving your graph, the PDF was one of the ones that you can use to print in the future. And also, I didn't really want to save it as anything else because I didn't want to import it into Microsoft Word or into a PowerPoint or anything like that, and I didn't have graphics programs that I could open it with. And my computer does have Adobe, so I can download it as a PDF and open it up on this screen, and this pops up. So that concludes my tutorial. I hope from my explanation you find it a lot easier to use Create a Graph.